The Klamath Basin is one of the most unique places in America. A wide variety of plants and animals flourish in the high-elevation marshes of the Klamath's headwaters, and a host of migratory fish species return to the river each year to spawn. Over the years, the Klamath's rich ecological diversity has provided the resources necessary for people from very different backgrounds and cultures to flourish. For thousands of years, 4 culturally distinct Native American tribes have called the Klamath Basin home. The Klamath tribes of Oregon, the Karuk along the Middle Klamath, the Hupa along the Trinity River, and the Yurok tribe at the mouth of the Klamath. Each tribe has a unique language and cultural practices. Together, these represent the largest tribe in Oregon and the 3 largest tribes in California. Later, European settlers arrived, giving rise to irrigated agriculture in the fertile lands of the Upper Basin, commercial fisheries along the coast, and the construction of hydropower dams along the Middle Klamath. Today, many believe that the mighty Klamath River has been asked to do too much. Farmers need dependable irrigation deliveries, while tribes and fishermen seek to protect and restore dwindling runs of salmon. This struggle over the Klamath's water has ignited a bitter debate, pitting farmers versus fishermen, fishermen versus environmentalists, environmentalists versus tribes. The end result is a rotating crisis. In some years, farmers are denied irrigation flows, leaving crops to wither and die in the field. Other years, tribal and fishing interests suffer as low flows and poor water quality lead to fish kills and low returns of salmon. As the economies of the basin have collapsed, farmers and fishermen have gone bankrupt and tribal communities have sunk deeper into poverty. However, there is one player in the basin who has not been affected by this rotating crisis: Pacificor. While farmers and fishermen take turns asking Congress for disaster relief, Pacificor continues to turn a profit for shareholders and parent corporations. As farmers mortgage their farms, fishermen take out loans to make payments on their boats, and Indians struggle to feed themselves, Pacificor has not been held accountable for their impacts on the river, until now. For the first time in 50 years, the communities of the Klamath River have the opportunity to evaluate the benefits and impacts of Pacificor's Klamath dams. The dams are currently undergoing a federally mandated relicensing process. Many basin residents see this as an opportunity to drastically improve the health of the river by removing the 4 lower dams. This would allow for a dramatic improvement in the fishery, resulting in healthier economies, fewer regulatory burdens for farmers, and a sustainable rural lifestyle for all. What role did the dams play in the decline of salmon? The decline of water quality? The loss of tourist-based economies? The loss of rural lifestyles? Can the electricity the dams produce be replaced with other forms of power? Can the diverse communities in the basin work together to solve common problems? To answer these questions, we'll talk to residents and community leaders from around the basin, farmers, fishermen, and tribal members. We will also talk to researchers, scientists, and economists. What everyone shares is a common vision of economic stability and rural lifestyles. Experts agree that Klamath fish populations are declining at a rapid pace. Although many factors contribute to this decline, Pacificor's dams may be the most significant. To better understand how dams affect the fishery, we must first understand the fish and their habitat.
The Klamath is a major river on the west coast for anadromous fish species. It's one of the top 3. It's right up there with the Sacramento and Columbia. So we're talking a major river. The river has something going on all times of year. In the past, that diversity has been one of the things that has sustained the people here, including Yurok, Karuk, Hupa, the Native Americans on there. And that was really a key feature, was the diversity of the fish runs.
The Klamath hosts several different species of fish, such as spring chinook, fall chinook, the threatened coho salmon, steelhead trout, several species of lamprey, and the secretive green sturgeon. Some species, such as chum salmon, pink salmon, and candlefish, are now extinct in the Klamath. Perhaps the biggest impact of the dams is that they deny access to over 350 miles of historic spawning habitat upstream of the latterless Iron Gate Dam.
Chinook, steelhead coho, and Pacific lamprey historically did go above the dams. We found information that indicated Chinook salmon historically migrated to the vicinity of Bly on the Sprague River, well above Upper Klamath Lake. The runs were absolutely cut off when Copco 1 dam was constructed.
When the first Copco dam went in, the company was promising that fish passage would be put in as part of that, which subsequently they reneged on after the dam was built.
The letter written in 1916 by power company officials stated, "Ample provision has been made in the plans for the dam for a fish ladder which will permit unobstructed passage of fish up the Klamath River. If it appears that anything further can be done to facilitate the passage of fish upstream during the construction of the dam, our engineers are instructed to do whatever is necessary to bring this about at once." In 1918, Copco 1 was completed without a fish ladder. The Klamath tribes of Oregon have not fished for salmon since. The power company's broken promise set the Klamath salmon on a path to extinction. Today, we are almost at the point of no return.
The salmon, as well as the other fish, which are naturally resilient. These are fish that are adapted to landscape scale catastrophes and then coming back, but they just reach a point where they just can't deal with it anymore. And when I see things like that the Sacramento River is having near record runs, while the Klamath has the bottom dropping out of it, it tends to eliminate the ocean as a common variable. What's happened in the last years, it's been a collapse. It's been a collapse of the stocks.
I figured all them salmon just couldn't be wrong, and salmon fish is pretty shrewd. They got senators and politicians too. Just about like a president, they run every 4 years.
The loss of salmon impacts everyone in the Klamath Basin, either directly or indirectly. Native and non-native communities alike have their economies at stake. Towns such as Happy Camp and Crescent City were once destinations for salmon and steelhead anglers from around the world. Today, fishing restrictions are slowly killing these communities.
Well, it affects us that we can't go fishing. We're being punished for a problem we didn't cause, obviously. The river is broken. How it affects everybody else is I spend $8,000 to $10,000 a year on boat maintenance, gas, bait. That's money that's not going to the businesses, tackle. It's just a tremendous economic impact beyond the fishing community. Restaurants, the list goes on. The fishermen, which are probably considered the hook and bullet crowd, are really fed up. The sleeping giant is getting up and getting out of bed because there are so many people that are fishermen that are upset about this, and there's a lot of conservative fishermen. I'm a lifetime Republican. They keep calling me for donations, and I'm saying, "You gonna fix the Klamath River? Call me back when you're gonna fix the river."
With the near total closure of 700 miles of coastline to the commercial fishing in 2006, the Klamath's problems spilled outside the basin, affecting economies up and down the California and Oregon coast.
Our ocean fisheries are managed on the basis of the health of the Klamath stocks, so that when there's a decline in Klamath stocks or when they're in trouble, then it affects our ocean fisheries too.
We've been suffering in the fisheries restrictions since 1980 because of the Klamath River, and it's finally come to a head, and it's about time. We're facing a zero fishing season for the first time in history, but the bottom line is that the coastal communities in Northern California have been suffering for a long time, and the people there have been suffering for a long time because they don't have any other economic base to work off of. There's no particularly good tourist draw or anything like that.
20 years ago, we had about 5,000 fishermen in California. Today, we have only around 1,000 permits left. So because of this whole ongoing Klamath situation, we have lost 80% of our fleet so far, and we can't go any further. You know, this has to stop now.
They got to fix the Klamath River, or we're dead. It's as simple as that. You bet it's going to affect us and put me out of business.
Salmon commands a premium because it is so valued as a food source by consumers. To understand the importance of the closure, we must consider all the jobs at stake from harvest to dinner plate. This includes processors, refrigeration, fish markets, cooks, servers, and restaurant owners.
We think right now the estimates are that if there had been a total closure this year on the commercial and recreational fishery, it would probably been in the neighborhood of $1 billion. That's with a B. It hasn't quite that bad, but it's going to be severe on the commercial fishery. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars being lost to coastal economies.
For the tribes of the basin, the loss of salmon is felt spiritually as well as financially. The tribes still depend on subsistence fishing to feed themselves, and while it's getting harder for downriver tribes to fill their smokehouses, the Klamath tribes of Oregon, located above the dams, have not seen salmon in nearly 90 years. Still, the greatest impact may be cultural. As runs of salmon are lost, so are the ceremonies that celebrate their return.
My elders would tell me that they used to be able to walk across the river on the backs of these fish because there were so many fish in the river. It just isn't that way anymore.
There isn't enough abundance to meet even minimal subsistence needs for the tribe. There's no economic opportunity for the tribe. And this is just one of many, many years where that situation's been there.
It's the #1 food source you can put on the table, and it's something that comes right from the river. We didn't have to go to Safeway to get it or nowhere else. It's a gift from the Creator, and we share it with our people.
You know, we're a communal-based people, so we will, if you have somebody in your family that has a net, has a boat, has the ability to harvest fish, normally that person will go and spread the fish around to the elders and the people who don't have fishermen in their families anymore. And a lot of people would gather strength and pride from that because that was their niche. You know, if you don't have a lot of money, maybe you don't have a strong education, but you know how to fish and you can catch a fish when other people can't see a fish, that is something to feel good about.
I'm a traditional dip net fisherman down at Ishpeming Falls. It is handed down to me by way of my family. Salmon is basically everything. Salmon is the focus of our sense of well-being. Everything we do has something to do, some relation to salmon.
The federal government has an obligation to protect and restore the reserved fishing rights of basin tribes. The removal of the Klamath River dams is a primary issue covered by the federal trust responsibility.
We continue to do our ceremonies and believe that if we continue to honor our ancient responsibility to the salmon, that they will continue to honor their end of the bargain in return to honor us with their flesh.
There's a balance that our beliefs call for having to be maintained, and when that balance gets disrupted, it affects everything in all of our lives. It affects our culture, it affects our children, it affects our families, it affects our health.
Because of the dams and Pacific Corps' inaction to provide fish passage, we don't have those salmons. You know, we used to go out and catch hundreds of pounds of salmon, and dry them up and store them over the winter, until the next run started. But these days, a lot of our folks, unfortunately, are depending upon commodities, what they call commodities. And I don't know how many non-tribal folks are familiar with commodities, but talk about some unhealthy food.
Most people who are thinking about the Klamath or hearing about the Klamath have no idea the extent of subsistence fishing that's happening or has been happening until really very recently. historically people were eating about 1.5 pounds of salmon per person per day, but as of 2004, which is when I was doing the original work, people were eating only 5 pounds per person in an entire year.
There's a tremendous environmental injustice happening here. When you've got large corporations such as Scottish Power, who has recently sold Pacificor to Mid-American, who's owned by Berkshire Hathaway, who in turn is also owned by Warren Buffett. So what you're talking about here is big money people making money as a direct result of an environmental injustice. To me, being that far out of balance and to be able to make profits from it, that's just an atrocity.
We have a responsibility that was given to us by the Creator, and we still today do everything in our power to fulfill that responsibility. We think companies and corporations like Pacificor also have a responsibility, not just to us, but to society. We'll continue fighting until these dams that are destroying our people are taken down, or until we don't exist anymore because we weren't successful.
In 2004, Pacificor filed an application to renew their license to operate the Klamath dams. Despite much input from tribes and fishermen, their application contained no provisions to improve fish habitat or build fish passage around the dams. In the past, federal resource managers have had few options for improving conditions for salmon. One option was to increase river flows by curtailing irrigation diversions to the Klamath Project farmers. In 2001, this had disastrous consequences for farmers.
2001 isn't too far out of our minds. It's present every day that we wake up. We have a fear of whether or not we will have water to irrigate with. And we saw devastating impacts to our neighbors, neighbors that unfortunately are no longer with us here in the basin because they couldn't make it through that year. But we are still here, and we're trying to do everything we can to help make sure that that's the case 10 years from now.
In addition to water, farmers are concerned with affordable power. When the California-Oregon Power Company built the Klamath dams at the turn of the last century, Klamath Project farmers signed a contract granting them low-cost power. That contract expired with the dam license, and today project farmers face a sharp increase in power rates.
The Bureau of Reclamation allowed COPCO in 1917 to establish some dams on the Klamath River, and in lieu of that, of the Bureau of Reclamation developing those dams, what happened in turn was that we had a negotiated price for our power. This is a huge cost increase to us here on the land.
Power is extremely important to us here from a standpoint of water efficiency. You go back to 2001 when the water was shut off here, and the emphasis has been we need to be more efficient, use less water. And so what you've seen with electricity and with the power rates being affordable is you can go to sprinkler irrigation, you can go to these center pivot systems, very highly efficient, better than just flood irrigating. And so there's been a real movement to that here, and so the power is really important. There had been talks with Pacificor for a couple of years, really, leading up to this. We knew the contract was coming up. We always thought in our minds, and I think that Pacificor certainly didn't discourage us from thinking this way, is that we would renegotiate another contract long term. I don't think that we're looking for the same power rate. I think we're looking for a happy medium. What we need is some stability and affordable rate.
But we're looking at wind, we're looking at solar, we're looking at geothermal, we're looking at biomass. We're trying to find what fits for us that would allow something larger scale on the river to happen, that would allow us to still maintain low-cost, affordable electricity for those of us that live here in the basin. This is a community of people that are all working together to try and
solve problems and to try to sustain our livelihoods.
In 2004, with residents from tribal, fishing, and farming communities all suffering, came a new opportunity for change: the relicensing of Pacificor's Klamath dams. Many view the relicensing as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to improve the fishery and bring economic stability to the basin's communities.
We've got a river in trouble. We have a farming community in trouble. The relicensing of these dams has brought us together because they mean one thing for one group, and for us they mean something totally different. But that doesn't mean that they can't be dealt with together to make something that's suitable for both of us to live with.
In the summer of 2005, Karuk water quality technicians began sampling Iron Gate and Copco reservoirs. The study was aimed at better understanding how the growth of large mats of algae affects water quality. What they found was startling.
We did surface grab samples in both the coves of the reservoirs and the open water and in the river stations above and below the reservoirs to see what kind of levels of algae and toxins were coming into and exiting the reservoirs. The toxic algae that we were finding was Microcystis aeruginosa. It